Hey everyone, I'm really excited to have you here today because we're about to dive into some serious winter weather that's making its way across the United States. Over the next few days, we're going to be seeing not one, but two winter storms, and trust me when I say these aren't your typical winter weather events. We're talking about everything from snow and ice to dangerously cold temperatures, especially in areas that don't usually experience such extreme weather. So whether you live in the Northeast, the Deep South, or anywhere in between, this is one of those forecasts you're going to want to pay attention to because these storms are going to bring a whole lot of action. Grab a hot drink, get comfortable, and let's break it all down so you know exactly what to expect in the coming days. Let's start with what's happening right now across the country. At this moment, we've got a major storm system moving across the Ohio Valley. If you're in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, or even parts of New England, you're already seeing some light to moderate snow. This is just the beginning. As this system moves eastward, you can expect a few inches of snow to accumulate through the rest of the day, especially across the Northeast. But here's where things get interesting. There's also a risk for severe weather in the Southeast. If you live in northern Florida, Alabama, or anywhere along the Gulf Coast, you'll want to keep a close eye on the weather this afternoon. We've got a line of thunderstorms moving through, and while it's going to bring heavy rain, the bigger concern is the possibility of isolated tornadoes, damaging winds, and some really intense thunderstorms. This could lead to dangerous conditions, so make sure you stay weather aware, especially if you're in the Southeast later today. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. Now, let's talk about what's coming tomorrow. Tomorrow is when the real action starts to unfold, particularly in the Northeast. A second major winter storm will develop and begin to affect areas like Maryland, Pennsylvania, and southern New England starting around midday. By the time we get to tomorrow afternoon and evening, this storm will be dumping anywhere from 4 to 10 inches of snow in some locations, especially in higher elevations. So if you're in places like western Massachusetts, southern Vermont, or upstate New York, prepare for heavy, wet snow that will accumulate quickly, causing potentially hazardous driving conditions. This snow is going to be dense and slushy, which means that it could lead to power outages and whiteout conditions, particularly in parts of New England. The snow will continue to intensify throughout the day, and it's going to spread from Pennsylvania and Maryland into areas like Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont. Some areas might even see up to a foot of snow in the higher elevations of New England. So if you're in those areas, keep an eye on the roads and be ready for a storm that could last well into Monday morning. But while the Northeast is dealing with snow, it's the South that's going to see a rare and pretty intense winter storm. This storm is going to have a huge impact on the Deep South, including Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and even Florida. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, wait, snow in Texas? That doesn't happen very often. And you're right, this kind of winter weather is super rare for these parts, but that's exactly what we're going to see. A lot of these areas, including Houston, could see several inches of snow, which is pretty mind-blowing for places that rarely get snow, if ever. But that's not all. We're also dealing with ice, sleet, and freezing rain, which is just going to make things even more treacherous. This is the kind of event that only happens once every 5 to 10 years in these areas, so it's definitely one to watch closely. The storm will really begin to ramp up on Monday evening when snow and freezing rain will start to move into central Texas. Areas like Dallas and Houston are going to be the first to feel the effects, with moderate snowfall, sleet, and freezing rain expected to make travel nearly impossible. And trust me, when I say that the roads in these areas are just not built to handle winter weather like this. If you're in Houston or anywhere along the Gulf Coast, you're going to want to be prepared for some serious disruptions. So take the time now to make sure you've got everything you need, like food, water, and batteries, just in case you lose power. This is one of those storms that could lead to power outages, so it's better to be safe than sorry. By Tuesday morning, the storm will begin to expand in size, and it's going to cover an even bigger area. From Texas to Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, moderate snowfall will be possible, especially in places like Baton Rouge and New Orleans. In fact, New Orleans could see several inches of snow, which is almost unheard of for this city. Along with the snow, freezing rain, and sleet will continue to cause major issues, particularly in places like Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and even parts of Florida. This is where the real concern comes in. When you combine ice with snow, you're looking at hazardous driving conditions, fallen trees, power lines, and overall dangerous conditions. If you live in these areas, you should be prepared for major disruptions in your day-to-day life, including potential power outages and very icy roads. As we move into Tuesday evening, the snow will continue to move eastward, bringing more winter weather to parts of Florida, Georgia, and The Carolinas, if you're in Tallahassee, Jacksonville, or other parts of Florida, you could see snow or ice accumulation, which is incredibly rare. And it's not just Florida that's going to be impacted. Georgia and the Carolinas are also in the line of fire. Areas like Charleston, South Carolina, and even parts of North Carolina could see snow, ice, and sleet, which is something these areas don't usually have to deal with. As you can imagine, this will create a lot of problems on the roads. And if you're in these areas, it's a good idea to stay home if you can. The storm will start moving off the coast by Thursday, but it's going to leave behind a mess in the form of ice, snow, and cold temperatures that will take a while to clear up. Speaking of cold temperatures, we can't talk about this storm without mentioning the Arctic blast that's coming along with it. This cold air is going to push down from Canada and bring some of the coldest temperatures we've seen in years. For many parts of the Midwest and Northern Plains, Monday morning is going to be the coldest of the week, with temperatures well below freezing and wind chills that will make it feel even colder. In fact, we could be looking at wind chills as low as 50 degrees below zero in places like North Dakota and Minnesota. This is seriously dangerous cold. So if you're in these areas, make sure you're bundled up and prepared for extreme conditions. By Tuesday, this cold air will continue to move eastward, bringing freezing temperatures all the way down to the Gulf Coast. So even if you're not getting snow or ice, you can still expect some brutally cold conditions, especially overnight. One of the big concerns with this storm is the ice. In many parts of the southeast, including Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and even parts of Georgia and Florida, we're going to see significant ice accumulation. And these areas just aren't prepared for that. Ice on the roads is a huge problem because it can make driving extremely dangerous. And because many of these places don't have the infrastructure to treat roads for ice, conditions are going to get really hazardous. So if you live in these areas, please take extra precautions and avoid driving if you can. The ice could also lead to power outages, so make sure you have a backup plan in case the power goes out. Now, as we look at this, we can see that there's a huge streak of enhanced winds moving up from Mexico through Texas and into the southeastern U.S. This is going to carry a ton of subtropical moisture with it, and it's going to cause some significant storms across the southern part of the country. But here's where it gets interesting. Just a bit north of this enhanced wind streak, we've got a small disturbance, a kink in the jet stream, kind of hanging out a few thousand feet above the surface. This little disturbance is going to interact with the larger system we've been tracking, and it looks like it's going to be the catalyst for another storm. This smaller feature is showing up more and more on the models, and it's likely going to develop into something significant for the Northeast. So while we've been focused on the big storm and the overrunning event in the south, this little disturbance is going to break off and become its own storm. As we go into Sunday, this little kink is going to bring cold air into the system, which could set up winter weather conditions in the Northeast, especially for areas like Washington, D.C. to Boston. That's right. It looks like we're going to have a full-on winter storm moving in for Sunday. But we're not done yet. Let's talk more about this big system and everything else that's coming behind it. Let's take a look at the ensemble models. These are averaging the results from multiple models, which gives us a better idea of what to expect. We've been talking about this Arctic blast for a while now, and the models are still showing that big froth pushing through from Sunday into Monday. This is going to bring an intense shot of cold air to millions of people across the United States. And with this blast of cold air, we'll see snow and ice develop over a large portion of the country. I know it's been a long wait, but we're getting close enough now to really start to dig into the details of where this cold air is going and how it's going to affect you. Let's zoom in on the storm, break down what's coming. First, this moisture from the Pacific is going to start moving in and producing heavy precipitation in St. Louis by as early as 10 p.m. tonight. It's going to be an active evening in the Midwest, and we could see some isolated thunderstorms in places like Memphis and Nashville. Then, as we get into the early morning hours tomorrow, rain is going to continue falling across the Ohio River, pushing eastward. That little disturbance in the jet stream is going to bring cold air in on the backside of the system, and that's going to trigger some snow in places like Chicago and Detroit. In fact, we could see a heavy shot of snow in Detroit as early as 9 a.m. on Saturday, and it's going to spread across the Great Lakes. Cleveland, Buffalo, and other cities in the region are going to see heavy snow too. If you're in these areas, especially near the Great Lakes, expect lake effect snow to add even more to the total. Meanwhile, down south, we're still going to see rain and thunderstorms, but pay attention to this area around New Orleans, Mobile, and the Florida Panhandle. We're expecting some gusty winds and heavy rain here, and there's also a chance this area could see stronger convection, which could lead to severe weather. As we move through Saturday night, that disturbance we mentioned earlier will combine with the larger storm system, and it's going to push more moisture into the region. By Sunday, we'll see snow start to develop along the northwest side of the Appalachian Mountains, affecting areas like eastern Kentucky, southern Ohio, and West Virginia. Snow will continue to spread into the I-95 corridor, hitting cities like Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston. I'm confident these cities are going to get snow, but there's a catch-up. The coastal areas are always tricky, and this rain-snow line could cause some forecasting headaches, but overall, it looks like we're in for a good shot of snow across the Northeast. Let's talk snow totals. Right now, we're not 100% sure exactly how much snow will fall where, but we're getting closer to a more confident prediction. It looks like places like Charleston, West Virginia, and Pikeville, Kentucky, could see a couple of inches of snow on the northwest side of the storm. For cities like Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston, I'm confident we'll see at least 3 inches, with some areas possibly seeing more. The national blend of models is showing 3.6 inches for Boston, but we know this storm could drop 6 inches or more, so we'll keep watching it closely. As we move into the weekend, I want you to be prepared for travel impacts. The snow and rain are going to cause a lot of issues from the mountains of West Virginia up to Boston. New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania are going to see the worst of it, with travel disruptions possible, especially during the Monday morning commute. If you're right on that rain-snow line, things could get really messy, and I expect some very tricky driving conditions. Be prepared for delays and slowdowns, and make sure you plan ahead. Now, let's look even further ahead into next week. I want to talk about that rare winter storm we've been mentioning in the South. The probability of seeing more than 3 inches of snow in places like Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas is going up, and it's starting to look like this storm is going to be a real game changer. It's still a bit too early to pinpoint exact snow totals, but I'm confident that we're going to see significant snow, sleet, and ice across these areas. For some of these regions, it's going to be their first winter storm in years, and that could lead to major impacts, including power outages and difficult travel. And speaking of ice, the storm in the southeast is going to bring a lot of challenges. There's a chance we could see ice storms in places like southern Georgia, northern Florida, and parts of South Carolina. The infrastructure in these areas isn't built for this kind of weather, so if you're in one of these regions, start preparing now. Power outages are possible, and travel could be nearly impossible in areas that get hit hard by ice. We're still working on fine-tuning the forecast, but it's definitely something we're keeping a close eye on. Looking ahead to the middle of next week, it's still uncertain exactly how the storm will play out, but we're already seeing signals for wintry precipitation in the southeast, stretching all the way into Florida. This could be a historic storm for many of these areas, and it's one you're going to want to stay on top of as we approach Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. As we move even further into the future, it looks like the weather is going to stay active for the rest of January. We're tracking multiple storms, and this Arctic blast is going to continue influencing weather patterns for the foreseeable future. It's going to be cold, and we'll likely see more snow and ice, so stay tuned for updates. Thanks so much for sticking with me today. Things are going to get hectic around here, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the latest updates. I'll be here every day to keep you informed as these storms develop, and we might even be doing some live streams as the weather gets more intense. Share this video with your friends and family so they can stay up to date too, and make sure to hit that like button if you found this video helpful. Stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.